The U.S. has lost its right to say it's a leader in the free world. This statement from a former French prime minister followed the recent breakdown of talks between President Trump and President Zelensky. As the traditional leader of the liberal bloc and the so-called world's police, is the U.S. undergoing a fundamental shift in its foreign policy? And how will the global order change after the Ukraine war? To discuss this, we are joined in the studio by Professor Chae-sung from Seoul National University's Department of Political Science and International Relations. Welcome to the studio, Professor.
Thank you for having me in this great program.
So President Trump, actually, he is reshaping the global order in a certain way, and possibly how he approached to end the Ukraine war highlights his transactional diplomacy. So can you briefly explain how Trump's view on the Ukraine war differ from Biden's?
Very different. When we talk about different approaches to how to end the Ukraine war, we have to look at how they perceive the nature of the Ukraine war. They have very different views. The first view is that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is totally illegal. They want to conquer the territory of a foreign country for the reason of geopolitical interests. But the current international order is based on the fundamental norms of territorial integrity and national sovereignty. So to conquer the territories of other countries is totally illegal from the perspective of international politics and international law. So we can say that Russia's invasion is against the international law, the very basic norms, even though Russia is a permanent member of U.S. Security Council, who has the responsibility to uphold the international order. The second view, however, is that it's understandable because there was a trial by Ukraine, especially President Zelensky, to embrace the West influence to encroach upon the geopolitical interests of Russia, try to enter into the NATO, which would be critical influence to Russia's national interests. So it's understandable that Russia performed some kind of preemptive strike to protect its geopolitical perspective. So the Biden administration seems to embrace the first view. It is totally illegal, so we have to provide immense amount of weapons and economic assistance, and this war should end in Ukraine and Western Europe's favor to prevent this from happening again, probably to recover the territories that Russia illegally conquered in 2014, the Crimea, and 2022. But President Trump seems like to subscribe to the second view, that Russia has some kind of right as a great power. So Ukraine, as a relatively weak power, should be the object of the negotiation among the great powers. You have to deal with that. If President Trump's have that view, then this war could end by the negotiation between two great powers, Russia and the United States, to hurt the basic fundamental vital interests of Ukraine.
Yeah, currently it seems that Russia and Ukraine agree on the idea that the war should end, but they disagree on how to end the war. So do you think the U.S. is capable of bridging the gap in their positions in the following negotiations?
Well, so far there was agreement between United States and Ukraine that they will do the ceasefire for 30 days. However, Russia doesn't respond to that request so far, because President Trump already suggested that there should be a precondition for the negotiation. For Ukraine, President Trump will not permit Ukraine from entering into NATO. There will be no explicit security guarantee to Ukraine. So President Putin somehow already realized his most basic desires in dealing with how to do the ceasefire with Ukraine. So we'll see. If there is an agreement between President Trump and President Putin, then there might be trilateral agreement. But so far, if you look at what's happening in the battlefield and how President Trump is dealing with the issue, we cannot be sure that there will be a trilateral agreement yet.
Yes, of course. So the world is watching, actually, and the New York Times claims that the Trump administration dismantled 30 years of Pax Americana in just 50 days. So the U.S. global leadership has served maintaining stability of the global order and also maintain its dominance. So many worry that this policy shift toward isolationism may not serve U.S. interests. Do you think this policy shift will be a permanent one or just a temporary one?
Yes, that's a very critical question. I want to know. There is a spectrum of U.S. grand strategy so far in the history, ranging from neo-isolationism to primacy. So Trump must be somewhere in between. But I don't think President Trump is pursuing neo-isolationist policy because U.S. has predominant military power and remains the number one economic power so far. So the United States has the potential and ability to pursue the global leadership or academically hegemonic role. However, the problem is, do American people will support this kind of globalist policy? If you look back upon the last 30 years after the end of the Cold War, United States has so much burdens to deal with all the global affairs. But it was inflicted by many incidents, unexpected ones, such as 9/11, 2008 economic recession, and COVID crisis. So the U.S. taxpayers are not satisfactory with the United States government is doing to deal with global affairs. So President Trump thinks that we should be rewarded for our leadership. And there is a serious economic domestic problem, such as growth rate, declining middle power, job loss, immense inflow of immigrants. So that was a target of President Trump's campaign last year. So we'll see if President Trump pursues a very effective global policy which will satisfy U.S. taxpayer, then after Trump, there might be a reinvigoration of U.S. hegemonic policy to deal with all the global affairs. However, if United States, all the public and the main decision makers in the administration try to pursue a more selective engagement policy, then there might be a retreat and retrenchment from major areas such as Europe and Middle East, and they focus on the most vital interest, which will open the arena for other powers such as Russia and China. So we'll see. It will persist for at least 4 years, but after President Trump, there might be more realist-minded Republican candidate or some Democratic ideas to pursue the more globalist policy.
Like you said, there must be some geopolitical interest behind this policy shift. So in that regard, some argue that the Trump administration is pursuing reverse Kissinger strategy, that is aligning with Russia for the time being in order to counterbalance China. How do you perceive this perspective?
Yes, that's a very interesting observation. There was a dynamics in trilateral relations between the United States, China, and Russia, the former Soviet Union, and President Nixon and Henry Kissinger tried to change the dynamics in trilateral relations from the end of 1960s. So try to isolate USSR and have a strategic alignment with China, the Maoist China. And after that, there was 4 decades long favorable agreements relations between the United States and China. However, there were preconditions. At that time, there was a Sino-Soviet conflict from the end of 1950s. So they didn't get along for a long time. And China has the potential to balance against the Soviet Union at that time. And China has a strategic objective to pursue a favorable relations with the United States, which was realized in Deng Xiaoping's reform from 1978. However, if you look at the current situation, the Russia and China has a very good relations. There was an agreement about no limit friendship just before the Ukraine invasion, so in 2022. So even though China doesn't support Russia's invasion of Ukraine openly, but there was a transfer of technology and a lot of materials. So they are very good, relations between them. And there is a deep-rooted distrust between U.S. and Russia these days. So I don't know if Russia will trust the United States for the future, even though Trump thinks that they have a personally good relations with Putin. But that's totally different if there is a congruence in national interest. And more than anything else, at that time, Nixon and Henry Kissinger has a very keen strategic mind to deal with all those situations. However, I'm skeptical of President Trump's ability to do all this strategic work. So we'll see. If President Trump is very much strategically minded, then he will try to do some counterbalancing strategy against China by having a good relations with Russia. But that's some kind of theoretical so far.
Despite such complexities in this game,
Right.
many argue that Russia may be the biggest winner under Trump. So if the U.S. retrenchment from the European countries, if that is true, then it can embolden Russia's expansion of influence in that region.
Right.
Do you think there will be a security repercussion because of this policy change?
Yeah, that's very important. I think we are at the crossroad. If United States does not support European powers, then Russia will be emboldened to do more aggressive things, not just against Ukraine, but against Baltic states and Poland, which will threaten the congruence of NATO in the future. But in the history, especially after the end of the Cold War, United States pressed European countries to raise their military expenditure at least to 2% of GDP annually, but European countries did not respond for various reasons, including economic hardships, all those things. So until Biden administration, there was a request from United States to do something more to the European countries. However, there was a limit. Even after President Trump is doing more coercive policies toward Europe, then there might be some changes. However, if, as you said, Trump pursues some new isolationist policy and try to retreat from Europe, then European countries should think about their own way of defending themselves, such as making their own security institutions, NATO without the US, enhancing strategic autonomy. These days, France talk about Eurobomb, meaning that France will provide a nuclear extended deterrence to Poland and Eastern European countries. I don't know if France and UK has sufficient nuclear power to do so, but this is a very critical moment. If United States try to retreat from European security architecture, then European countries should do something which is very much independent from the US scheme. So if that happens, then the transatlantic alliance will be very much weakened or even fall apart.
Yes, like you said, the transatlantic alliance relationship show signs of weakness. But many argue, says that Indo-Pacific region cannot be spared from similar challenges as well. So how do you foresee the alliance relationship in the Indo-Pacific in the long term?
Right, right. To compare these two regions will be very important. In European scene, President Trump tried to have peace by having good relations with Putin. However, in East Asia, we don't know yet. After he deals with all the European affairs, he will come to East Asia and deal with China affairs. He said that he will impose 65% of tariff on China, but up to now it's 10 or 20% only. So we'll see how President Trump's China policy will play out in the future. But we can observe that from the first President Trump's presidency, that there was a very strong and severe strategy to check and balance against China by publishing so-called Indo-Pacific strategy in 2019. So we can guess that President Trump's China policy will be very aggressive. In that sense, I think United States, not just President Trump, but all the senior decision makers, Department of Defense and State Department, they know that alliances are critical in dealing with China. So even though they put more pressure economically on alliance by imposing tariff and criticizing alliances that they are economic free riders, but in security terms, they have to balance against China. So they need alliances, try to develop some kind of trilateral or minilateral network of alliances such as US-ROK, Japan trilateral, or AUKUS, or Quad. So very different from Europe. In European scene, European powers are afraid of being abandoned. However, in East Asia, we are, to some extent, afraid of being entrapped in US-China policy. So how alliance will respond to President Trump's China policy militarily will be very critical for all the allies and strategic partners in this region.
Mm-hmm. Then lastly, let's talk about South Korea, which is also a critical ally in this region. Well, many South Koreans worry that Trump's transactional approach can somehow have an impact on allied posture on the Korean Peninsula because of his deal-making approach, which may play out similarly to South Korea. So what lessons should South Korea draw from the way that the U.S. deal with the Ukraine crisis?
Right. As you said, I think there will be a transactional pressure on South Korea. If you read President Trump's address, he criticized South Korea as one example of economic free rider. So you have to give more, contributions to burden sharing. You have to raise military expenditure probably above 3% of GDP. Do many things. I think to some extent we can deal with that, try to minimize economic loss. But we have to also correct the information that President Trump has, because he says some incorrect information about the economics. So we can deal with economic affairs by having more correct information and doing more negotiations. In military and security affairs, I think it's totally different. We have North Korea. Professor Kim, you are the specialist. So there is a growing military nuclear capabilities from North Korea. So there should be a close coordination with the United States how to deal with North Korea to the ultimate objective of totally denuclearizing North Korea. And also there is a very difficult issue of how to cooperate between South Korea and the United States to deal with Chinese, some kind of expansionist policies in South China Sea and in Taiwan. There will be a consistent request from the United States that South Korea should do more to deal with China issue. But China is a close partner to South Korea as well. So we have to navigate very difficult strategic rivalry between US and China. However, I think there will be more pressure from the United States that South Korea should do something, cooperate with Japan and Australia, show some strategic clarity rather than ambiguity in dealing with China. So I think our government should start to deal with that issue.
Yes, of course. As you explained in details, there are lots of challenges that we have to deal with in the coming years. Well, I think that's very, very good discussion today, and thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.